The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and journalists and editors and filmmakers and videographers. And this evening, we're going to do a lot of politics, a lot of Bronx politics. Specifically in our second segment, we're going to interview an author who wrote a book about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is very interesting and has some revelations for us. But in our first segment, we're thrilled to welcome our good friend David Cruz from Gothamist. Of course, people remember David in the Bronx from the Norwood News. Always nice to talk to David Cruz. How are you?
Good, Gary. How you doing?
We're getting along and trying to, sort out what the heck is going on with our two special elections. Let's just take a step back. This was the first time the Bronx had ever had a ranked choice voting election. We know there was one in Queens. It took several weeks to get that resolved. What's your impression of the system? Let's start there, and how it has worked or maybe not worked.
I think that it's still, I think there still needs to be some time for the voters to sort of understand how the process works. Obviously you have the ability to rank the folks that you would want to see be your legislator, but you don't have to vote for all five. You can essentially maybe vote for two, or you can even vote for one. And so there's still kind of like a bit of a grace period, learning curve for people to really understand how the process works. I mean, obviously now that we have ranked choice voting, you don't instantaneously get a result if the candidates do not get 50% or more of the vote. And so the days of sort of like these election night parties are kind of sort of like out the door now as a result of ranked choice voting. And so it does give the ability for voters to think that they do have a choice. It's not like they just have to vote for one person. They could very well have, they could vote for five people who they think matches the, sort of like the interests or what they need in a legislator. And of course, like with the 15th and the 11th, right now they're ranked choice voting. The counting process is taking place. The election took place on March 23rd. And of course, we know who the preliminary winners are. Although from what we're hearing, it appears for the 11th council district race, it looks like that's going towards Eric Dinowitz, who was considered sort of the front runner of the race, although you do have Mino Laura, who's sort of coming at a distant second and has already sort of announced that she will be once again vying for the seat in the June primary.
The primary, yeah. And then in the 11th, it was Oswald Felice. The
15th was the
15th, yes. I'm sorry, yeah. The time lag is, for me, quite disturbing, is that voters vote and then they would like to get a result and know within a reasonable period of time. I mean, this election was March 23rd. We're taping this on Monday, April 12th. I mean, 3 weeks later, and now we're still not there. Is this a case that this can be figured out and they can move it quicker eventually? Or at this point, is this what we're stuck with and this is the system?
No, I think this is sort of temporary for right now, simply because the City Board of Elections does have software that it's sort of will be beta testing and have ready for the June primary soon, as my colleague Bridget Bergen has been reporting. Right now, what's happening is that they're hand counting the votes. And so that is what's sort of causing a bit of a slowdown. Now, the City Board of Elections will have a sort of like a machines that will be able to sort of process these votes in a timelier way, in a faster way. And of course, we need that in order to know who for the outcome of essentially all the council races within the city. I mean, I think right now there's 2/3 of the city council that have primaries coming up, and so yes, it is a lot slower, although it won't be as slow as the primary. I think you begin to see how fast things will be moving.
You think that, I mean, I've heard that they will have an automated system of some sort. What did you make of the teaming up? And I will tell you, there was something about it that disturbed me, that Jessica Haller and Mina Laura said, hey, if you're not going to pick me, pick her first or me second, that kind of thing. I feel like it's like trying to game the system rather than really appealing to voters. And frankly, when I've talked to advocates of ranked choice voting, they beat me down and said, no, that's not the case. But I still don't have a great feeling about, if you're a candidate, I would think you'd want to say, I'm the one, I'm the best, vote for me. Am I wrong about that?
I think traditionally people want to sort of like make themselves, make this sort of like an all man for themselves kind of an operation. But sometimes there's some candidates whose interests and sort of commonalities align to the point where they do want to team up and take on a candidate that they both feel does not represent the interests of the people. And so they are well aware that perhaps, Eric Dinowitz was the front runner in the race. And of course they thought that maybe Dinowitz was in line or had the interest more of the party than, say, the people. And so they sort of set aside the idea of competition to just try and essentially dethrone him. And so when you are considered the second choice, your fortunes can very well turn around if you end up, if you end up having a little bit more of a strategy behind wanting to dethrone that first person. And so like it's not sort of like just beholden to that one race. We've been seeing even in the mayor's race, candidates, the top tier candidates anyway, have been kind of coming together to take on, like, say, an issue or take on one candidate. And so it kind of tells you one thing as well, that perhaps, it sort of like clears out that we know who the front runner is of that race. And that can actually help the front runner as well, sort of like, get more, even greater support if it turns out that they are a viable candidate.
Were you surprised that Oswald Felice came out ahead? Now I realize that's a lot closer than Eric Dinowitz's apparent victory, but were you surprised that he came out ahead? I mean, I know that Aisha Bravo and John Sanchez both were, very well known and very well liked in their communities, and yet Mr. Felice, came ahead. We'll see how the ranked choice plays out, but I was a little surprised, frankly.
Well, I think I was pretty surprised by that too, just considering John Sanchez had a lot of help from outside PAC money, super PAC money that really just pumped in hundreds of thousands of dollars into that specific race, which I found pretty fascinating, considering special elections don't really get that much attention. But here you had Sanchez getting a really good leg up from a PAC that had been funded primarily by Alice Walton, who is the heir of the Walmart Corporation. I found that pretty fascinating. And, Aisha Bravo, she also had gotten a lot of endorsements, also some support from super PACs, whereas Oswald Felice virtually didn't get anything. And so I did speak to his campaign about that. And he told me that, he's been sort of like on the ground for the last few months. And that's what helped establish himself with the residents within the 15th council district. He simply just went by the old traditional route of campaigning on the ground. And obviously with COVID, things are a little bit different, but I guess with him, he sort of just kind of took a chance and started campaigning out in public. And that's what his campaign anyway says, that, gave him a good advantage. This would to see how that kind of plays out in the end.
This is really interesting to me, because here they are spending all this money and it didn't turn out. And you're not even talking about a mega race where you need a ton of money. Money certainly helps. What do you make of this idea of super PACs? And now, the real estate billionaire Stephen Ross, you wrote the story about it, gave a $500,000 cash to a new super PAC. What do you think about this trend? What are they trying to do because the money doesn't go directly to the candidate.
Right.
It goes to their support systems, so to speak. What do you make of this? I'll ask you first, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Well, right now, I think we're in a very this election season is, quite frankly, one of the more important election seasons in recent memory, simply because we're under this. We're sort of at the tail end of COVID, and right now the big question becomes economic recovery. And so right now the business community in New York City is very scared over just how sort of the direction of where New York City is going. And so they are looking to essentially influence the race by supporting candidates they think are aligned with the business interests of New York City. And so, yes, you do have more super PACs contributing to these races now, because we're sort of like under that kind of like sort of like that atmosphere right now, that vibe that I think, has gotten the business community really scared. And so right now the mayoral candidates that are supported by these super PACs are, folks like William McGuire and Sean Donovan, who are very, pro-business. And, you're right, they don't have to contribute to them directly, but
but the point is that this is not for the mayoral race, that they're doing it in local races.
They're doing it for all the races, correct?
Yeah,
because they want a council that does not go ahead and sort of become the enemy of the business community. So they're going at it like block by block.
I spoke to John Sanchez about it, and he was very open, and he said to me, if Walmart thinks that because they did this, all of a sudden I'm going to open up a plot of land for them to rezone for them, as opposed to my advocacy for affordable housing, then they're sadly mistaken, because I'm not going to do that. I think it's interesting that they're picking winners, and interesting that they're picking them in local races. We've never had these mega corporations do that. Kind of changes some of the dynamic in local races, I think.
I think so too. And it does go back to this idea that we know that 2/3 of the council will be, new incoming lawmakers will be coming in. It'll shape sort of the direction of where the council is going to go. And so this is sort of the opportunity for the business community to try and influence it. Doesn't always mean that money will prevail, as we've kind of seen with John Sanchez. Even all this money did not really get him to the top.
Push him over the top.
It's intended to simply help influence the race. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
David Cruz from Gothamist, thank you so much. You want to give us a hint of what you're working on for next? What do you got coming up?
Well, I'm kind of tracing right now the history of Dominican power in New York City elections, and sort of like trying to tie it in with the potential win of Oswald Feliz.
We will look at that piece from Gothamist and look for you on WNYC and anywhere where the commentary is about the city and is important. And that's our buddy David Cruz from Gothamist. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
That's great. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, the book is The AOC Generation. It's a new book by David Freedlander, and he's going to join us and talk about AOC and the book right after this.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I'm very excited about this particular segment. We have an author who has written a book. The book is The AOC Generation. And when I said to our previous guest, David Cruz of Gothamist, that, oh, our next guest is, wrote a book about AOC, he was like, what, already? And so I don't know if it's the first book about AOC or the AOC generation, but we say good evening to David Freedlander, who is the author of that book. Nice to have you with us, David.
Thanks for having me.
Why was she such a compelling figure for you to write about, even at this, let's be honest, relatively early stage, to have books being written about her effect?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in fact, I wasn't even the first. I think I was probably like the third or the fourth.
All right.
And, when I approached them to tell them I was doing this book about her office, and they like hung up on me. They like didn't
really?
Wouldn't even entertain the thought of participating in the book, and said like, oh, you're the 10th person that's called us about this. So, so for me, I mean, she was just at the time when I was sort of thought about the book she sort of blotted out the sun for a while there. She just sort of took over the political world. I mean, it was really like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, it was like Trump plus Obama in terms of a political phenomenon, right? I mean, she was just everywhere all of a sudden from like total obscurity. I think maybe at one point I thought it would be like a biography of her or something. I wasn't quite sure, but there just wasn't enough kind of life there for it to be a biography. It's not just that she was so new on the political scene.
She's only 31.
Yeah, at the time, I mean, she was 29. And you go to school, you go to college. It's like she was elected at 28. There's like just a few years in there. And I didn't think that could probably carry a book. So I made it about all this other stuff.
Well, you did, and frankly, your documentation of her at Boston University was quite interesting to find out how she got there. I thought what was very, very interesting that emerged as I went through it is brand new Congress, Democratic Socialists of America, Justice America. I mean, all these groups, and even though ultimately she endorsed them and has become, in a way, their emblem.
Yeah.
Personally, and I pulled this quote out, I really feel like we are at a point in our democracy where we need to be firing on all cylinders. We need to be challenging the establishment everywhere that it is. And this is my place in the broader revolution. That she, despite the tags that have been put on her, has rejected all of this stuff in her mind because she's really focused on the original idea of helping people and changing their lives for the better. Do I have that right from the summary of everything I read and what you wrote?
I think so. I mean, if what you're trying to say is that she's sort of not it's not as if she was in Democratic Socialists of America and then ran for Congress.
That's right.
Carrying that torch. The book in a way is about what happened to sort of Democrats, the American left after Trump, which was such a sort of traumatic, I think, event for so many people that everybody kind of scrambled, got really involved in politics. And you had a group like, say, DSA, really come into kind of its own. And she was a real, I think she was sort of tagged as and thought of as a democratic socialist when she first emerged on the scene. But she started going to DSA meetings when she started running for Congress, to be really clear.
Yeah, and she was, if I can interrupt, and she was doing that because this was a way to get there, not necessarily because she endorsed the organization. And I'm certainly, we're not speaking for her, not to say that she doesn't endorse the organization, but that helping the organization wasn't her goal. It was, number one, to get her to Congress so that she could do that work. That's the way I interpret your book and what I know about her. I mean, I've interviewed her and moderated debates and everything else. The thing that I think really is wrapped up in this, and why maybe she had that reaction to you, because all that anybody, I don't want to say anybody, all that many people know about her are the tags, are the way that she's been labeled, and she wants to resist that and continue to get to the source, and doesn't want to engage in so many of these dialogues that'll give people more of an opportunity to distract from the work. That's my read of what I see.
Well, I think it actually cuts a little bit both ways, because I think that she is kind of sees herself as like a movement politician in a lot of ways. I mean, and if you recall her address at the DNC, which was like 90 seconds and shrouded in controversy,
yes.
because everything she does is shrouded in controversy. She talked about that she was sort of carrying all these various, forms and groups, all this energy into Congress with her. And so I think she doesn't necessarily see herself as like a DSA person, a Justice Democrats person, this or that, but she does sort of see herself as kind of the avatar of this left-wing youthful organizing. And she sort of, for better or worse, I think she sees herself as like carrying that flag into the Capitol.
And you, I think very correctly, and frankly, it really brought it to light for me, and I hadn't really considered it as strongly, was that the origin of that, the real germ of that, was Bernie Sanders, and that Bernie Sanders kind of opened the door to have her and others think, wow, this is possible. This is more than just like, a side political movement. Now, I did an interview with 3 of the Bronx Assembly members, the new young Bronx Assembly members who have recently been elected, Kenny Burgos, Chantel Jackson, and Amanda Septimo. And I asked them, did they believe that AOC was the person who kind of paved the way? Amanda Septimo had a tremendous answer. She said, yes, we credit what she did, but she was the result of a lot of grassroots work, certainly in the Bronx. I mean, historically, whether we have the Young Lords or other people in the Bronx who have been progressive minded, but here was somebody who finally stood up and actively represented them. I think, you write the AOC generation. To me, that's really what, in part, this is about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, she was just so young. I mean, old guys like you and I kind of think that. But,
shh, don't say it.
Yeah, it's really, it's sort of shocking in a way. I mean, she was really like, there's this notion that she was a bartender, right? As well. She came in, and while she certainly was a bartender, I mean, she was kind of a person who has left college and was trying to figure out what to do with their life in a challenging economy, I think, in a lot of ways. I mean, she, as you and I talked about before we started going, I mean, there was this like .com thing she was a part of, and other kind of nonprofits, and just kind of trying to find a way in the world when this thing happened. I mean, in a way, it was like a running for Congress is almost like a quarter life crisis or something,
You know what else? Frankly, it disturbs me because I interviewed her before she was elected and watched, like everybody else, have watched her career, is the way she's mischaracterized as being stupid or, not knowing the issues or not caring really about people. I have not gotten that sense from her. And if you watch the way she interrogated various people, in her role as a Congress member, she is as good and as fierce an interviewer or interrogator as I have ever seen in Congress. I mean, this, you don't write about that because you didn't get to that'll be the next book. Right. But that means people are, then it gets into anti-woman. Certainly, the fact that she's Hispanic, rankles certain people. So that's my impression of who she is as a figure, and frankly, as an elected official.
Yeah, I had in my book, it's not, to be clear, like, and I stated in the introduction, it's not an endorsement of her, it's not an endorsement of movement. Clearly. But I will say, I had that same experience, like meeting her for the first time when she was campaigning in 2018 against Joe Crowley. Because like you, I've interviewed lots of congressional candidates, long shot congressional candidates, and often you're just sort of like staring at your notebook like, oh my God, what is this person even? Do they know nothing? What are they even doing running for office? How do they even have a job? And her intelligence, I think, was apparent immediately. And she's just so articulate, and she speaks of her ideas so clearly that when you interview her, I almost find that I was often didn't know what else to say because she had sort of said everything so perfectly. You couldn't even come up with like a follow-up question. And I had the same thing, and it is funny, or not funny. It's the way in which the the political right has tried to characterize her as like, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about, and she's stupid. I mean, you really see the sexism and I think the racism come to the fore there, because I mean, she is as knowledgeable as any member of Congress I've ever met.
And, you know, as you know, I went and reviewed the interview that I had done with her prior to the election while she was campaigning. And when I watched it and watched her answers about fundamental questions about immigration, about workers' rights and all that, her answer, you know, and I've interviewed many one-time or first-time candidates, her answers were just defined that movement.
Exactly.
You know, very, very well. I thought
just to say, you know, like it's not as she would get tripped up when she was asked things that like she didn't quite know about, but she was also asked a range of things that no other congressional candidate is ever asked about, I think. I mean, and because, you know, she was supposed to be this sort of spokesperson for a whole movement and a whole generation. I mean, you know, that she was asked about everything, and most sitting members aren't asked about everything. I mean, they just don't have, you know, say or control over it.
You know what you did, we're almost out of time, but what you just said reminds me of when Bob Dylan was raised up to be the leader of a revolution. And he was like, you know, I'm a poet. I'm not that, even though I write the, you know, the times they are changing or many of these other things, Masters of War and all the other things. And I think there's a similarity here that it's like, I want to do the job. I don't necessarily need to be that, but of course, once the spotlight is on you, if you're smart enough, as she has done, you get yourself 1 million Twitter followers, and you go from there. Listen, last question for you. What's next? Are you going to do more about AOC, or what else are you working on so our viewers can enjoy your other work?
I write for New York Magazine and Politico Magazine and Vanity Fair and other places. And I'm kind of right now, I'm in the thick of the New York City mayor's race, which we only have, I think, 80 days or something to go. So that's taking up all my time and energy now.
We're going to be focusing on, we've already done a mayoral forum, and we're going to be doing more of those. Actually, I'm doing an educational mayoral forum in another week or two. But anyway, listen, David Freedlander, don't be a stranger now. Let's find out what you're doing. And certainly anything that relates to our home borough of the Bronx, we want to have you in here to chat about it. And thanks for the work on AOC. And I recommend it. The book is out. You can get it anywhere, the AOC Generation. And we appreciate your time this evening.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Okay, folks, that'll be it. Thanks to Stephen Powell for pitching in for Rebecca today. And this Thursday, we will tape an interview with Congressmember Richie Torres, and that'll be on Bronx Talk next Monday night. So everybody stay safe. We'll see you around. Thanks.